You are listening to Single Smart Female. This is Jen, explaining the possibilities in your love life and examining your Mantourage dating experiences. I am here to help you do life and love on your terms by tipping the scales of love permanently in your favor. So don't forget to text this episode to all of your single smart girlfriends, and let's get started. Hey, my single smart female. Guess what? It's your romantic fairy godmama, and today I have a single smart female listener question just for you that I think you'll find quite interesting. In fact, Miss Changing His Expectation writes, "Hi Jen, I am trying to implement your advice to talk and to go on dates with several men so that I can take the time to get to know them. I think it's a great way to not feel a sense of urgency or scarcity. My issue is that as soon as I start to feel a little bit of a stronger connection with a man, I can't help but hyper-focus and I lose interest in talking to the other ones. Another issue is that I found that most men expect intimacy after date 3 to 5. How do you change that expectation, and do you talk about needing more time right away?" Okay, Miss Changing His Expectation. Couple other things about you. First, I'm going to start with the fact that the questions that we ask when making a submission for the podcast, one of the questions is, how do you usually meet the men that you date? And you said that you like a coffee date just to assess compatibility. We're going to come back to that in a minute. And by the way, Miss Changing His Expectation is 53 and from Vancouver. Okay, so diving into this, I'm going to start with saying that sometimes we assume enjoying someone's company means that we have to turn all of our attention to them or we are being disloyal. We also go into fear mode because of being things like pleasure deprived. Now, what am I referring to exactly? In a way, you're asking, why is it that you start dating multiple people, talking to multiple people, and then all of a sudden you start liking one and then you don't have any interest in talking to anyone else? It's a natural response. A lot of it has to do with this loyalty thing. The majority of us are pretty darn loyal, or we've been wired that way. I can't say that for all women, because that is indeed not the case for all women, but there is a good percentage of women that when they really like somebody, they feel very loyal towards them and bored with everyone else. Now, the other thing about this is that we get excited, and so we have a lot of dopamine hits, and we have a big old biochemical fiesta that's going on in our body because we like this person. And so we go into fear mode, like I mentioned, because we are pleasure deprived. So we're afraid that that person's going to go away. So then we start thinking about them all the time. And I mean all the time. You know, when you wake up, you're looking at your phone to check to see if he messaged you. During the day, you're checking your phone to see if he messaged you. At night, you're checking your phone to see if he messaged you. Because when you're having that biochemical fiesta, like when the two of you engage, then when you're not engaging, fear sets in that you're never going to have that biochemical fiesta again, because we know it feels so good. If you're like most of the successful women that I'm talking to, you've probably spent a lot of time just focusing on being successful and not really taking hold of pleasure in your life and implementing pleasure. And pleasure isn't just sexual pleasure. Sexual pleasure is fantastic. You know, self-pleasure, fantastic. But it's also the little things in life that bring you pleasure, that bring you joy, that, you know, bring you happiness in your life that aren't related at all to a man. Because remember, once you get into the relationship, if he's your sole provider of pleasure in your life, you are in for a rocky, long ride, because the happiest women in relationships are the ones that don't make men their entire source of pleasure. So again, our need to focus on that person has a lot to do with being wired to be loyal and being pleasure deprived. Now, there are a host of other reasons. I've talked about being hyper-focused in many, many, many podcasts, but those are two big ones. So the other thing, I'm actually going to bring this back. One of the things you're doing is actually setting yourself up to lose in Mantourage dating. Why? Because Mantourage dating is a lot more than talking and going on dates with several men. It means a lot more. There's an approach to it. There is a way that we do things as an adored woman to actually give the process the due focus and energy that it deserves, because it is a very beautiful process and helps you so much with tunnel vision. But if you do it in a very bland way, which when you said that I like a coffee date to assess compatibility, that's an incredibly bland way to do mantourage dating. Now I hear it, but Jen, I don't this, I don't that. I need to know, do we have chemistry? You know what? There are women who go on. Now, does it work sometimes? Yes. But I can't tell you the countless times that it doesn't work. Women that go on coffee date after coffee date, drink date after drink date, and nothing's ever happening. Why? Because there's no setup in order for something good to happen. Okay? Activity date for the first date. All right, if you want to go big and ask, you've been talking to somebody for a while and you want to do something special and that's what you're asking for, do that. If maybe you've been talking to somebody for a short period of time, which to be honest, ladies, in my opinion, you should not be talking to anyone less than 2 weeks before you go meet them, because that is very, very high level adored woman stuff to be able to get that right. And so I recommend at least talking to somebody 2 weeks. Bare minimum. I actually recommend possibly 3 to 4. Then you go out on your first date. And it needs to be an activity date, not something where you're just seated looking at each other. Somewhere maybe you're walking, maybe it's an activity. The possibilities are truly endless, but it sets you up to it distracts your brain a little bit by having something to do so that conversation can flow a little more naturally so that we can circumvent nerves that are involved. And then we can get to whether or not you can actually have fun with this person, because that's actually more important than assessing, quote unquote, compatibility, which is what we talk about all the time. Does he meet all the criteria on the list? Mantourage dating is not about meeting the criteria on the list on the first date. Mantourage dating is about learning about yourself in reference to men, and then attracting the type of man that not only lights you up, but you light him up as well. Okay. So next, the question was about men expecting intimacy after date 3 to 5. Okay, let me make something very clear. When men have to spend a little more time getting to know you online, let's say you're meeting them exclusively online, if they have to spend some time getting to know you online, by the way, this is why women that I work with in Secret Society, there's a process that we go through. They learn the art of engagement during those weeks and how that proceeds. So then it merits, well, they figure out really soon whether or not this particular guy merits going on a first date with. When guys have to do that, you already have set yourself up higher in his brain, okay? And the expectancy of sex isn't the number one thought, okay? Just like you're going on these dates to assess compatibility, which I actually think you're just trying to assess chemistry, but then men are doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing, going on these really fast dates to try to assess chemistry, and then they've already set themselves up because it's based on that physical chemistry right there at the beginning instead of any mental chemistry. They've set themselves up for 3 to 5 dates to see whether or not it goes to the next level so they can actually assess that in-bed chemistry. And it doesn't work very often. It is a very crappy way to set up a lifelong romance. And there is so much failure in this approach. It's amazing to me that people still think that they can do it over and over again and that it's going to change their results somehow. And they do. And women keep doing it again and again and again instead of pulling up the big girl panties and asking for what they want and not being afraid of if he just says, you know, actually, I don't want to do this, being okay with it. He filtered himself out. And this is something that we do in Secret Society, and this is something that I teach, and it yields much more amazing results all the time, okay? Yes, you're going to still, even in that process, hit a few kinks where the guys aren't really receptive to it, but that goes away, and you'll start attracting guys that really want to get to know you, and they've already value you more because they're not going just into the in-person chemistry right away to assess that with no regards to the mental chemistry whatsoever. and then automatically into the in-bed chemistry. So the other thing that this sets up when you learn to do it my way as an adored woman is you learn it's not about his sexual time frame. It's about yours, okay? Your sexual time frame. As women, that's one thing that we get to control. He can be horny as hell. He can want you all he wants, okay? And he will. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sex isn't just on his term. It's not just on his time frame. And if he is asked, and by the way, this isn't something that we're going to get to the whole talking about. It's not something you just tell him. But if he is required to follow your sexual time frame, both of you end up much happier. And if he doesn't for some reason, that wasn't a guy for you, okay? I don't know how many times I'm going to say it, and this is really important for all women to really take in. And this is something to share with your teenage girls and your girls in your 20s as well. If a guy has a problem with waiting for you till you're ready to have sex, okay? And if he has a problem with that and he takes off, he would have been horrible as a long-term mate. He would have not been fulfilling on so many levels. So impatient guys in the sexual arena, let them go. There's so many women out there that are willing to sacrifice their own morals and their own time frames. Let him go. Let him go play in those masses. He will not be happy. Or he'll be temporarily happy and then it'll all dissolve as well. Very few people that make that connection. Don't get sucked into that. Don't get pressured into having sex before you're ready. And you're not hurting him in any way, shape, or form by not having sex with him. And I don't care how many men scream from the mountaintops differently. Yes, you will hear that. I don't actually hear that as often as, I'm making it out to be right now. It's not extreme. But most of the men that say things like that, they are not high-quality men. They are not long-term partners. Okay? Very, very few. I'm not going to say there aren't any, but very few. Like, it's a very minuscule amount. So remember, it's not about his sexual time frame. It's about your sexual time frame, especially if you're wanting long-term happiness. Okay. So another thing about this, I really hate, and I mean hate, setting expectations all the time with our words. It is the equivalent of having a business meeting about when you are going to have sex. It sucks, and it leaves nothing to romance and surprise, okay? So let me give you an example. You going into your first date and just saying, hey, I'm not the kind of girl that has sex until dates 3 to 5. It takes me a long time. There is nothing wrong with that fundamentally, but it's no fun. As you really become comfortable around your sexual boundaries, and you really become comfortable in who you are in reference to men by properly mantourage dating instead of just hyper-focusing on that one dude and kicking everybody else to the curb and being bored with them, everything changes. Everything changes. You don't have to have these boring-ass conversations just to set your boundaries. Like, hey, I'm not going to have sex with you tonight. Hey, I'm not going to do this. Hey, I'm not going to do that. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. And all women out there, there are a lot of women that say this stuff all the time, and then they do the exact opposite. So a lot of times when guys hear, oh, I'm not going to do this with you, I'm not going to do that with you, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Because they've heard it plenty of times. They've heard it plenty of times, and it still happens anyway. So just don't say it. Now, also don't do it, but it's actually twofold. So let's say you get lost in the moment, you end up doing it, then you haven't made yourself a hypocrite because you didn't say it, okay? But also, your actions are much more powerful than what you say. So having the ability to not say it and then just not do it because you're having so much fun in other things that you're doing, that's an adored woman's skill. I've had clients that are with a current boyfriend that they didn't kiss for an entire year. Not even a kiss. So really couldn't care less what a guy's sexual expectation is. When he's enamored with a woman, all bets are off. Every single last one of them, no matter how many scream differently. Okay? And again, not as many guys as you would think. So, with all of that said, I just want you to remember over and over again. If you want to be an adored woman, it's about your sexual time frame, not his. And you need to be comfortable with your time frame. Okay? And if your time frame is a lot longer than society's time frame, then so be it. That's just the way it is, and that's how you are going to be the happiest. I also want you to remember that it is important to set things up differently. Not only, by the way, when we were talking earlier, remember you're going to set up a different type of first date, because otherwise you're not really giving these guys a chance. You know, because you have one guy out of 10 that's going to be fantastic on that first coffee date, because he's really good at engaging at the table. He doesn't get nervous. He's just really good at it already. But the other 9 guys, they don't have a chance. And you're not establishing anything different in their head either about you, because you're doing the exact same thing all women do. Do that process differently as well. And then another process that we do in Secret Society is the different type of engagement. You know, taking a few weeks to get to know somebody online and qualifying them as a person to go out on a first date with, instead of just asking a few back and forth chat questions and then all of a sudden, let's meet and see if we're compatible, quote unquote, which is just another code word for, do we have chemistry? And honestly, unless you learn to build chemistry and see what there is mentally, because chemistry is something that can be magnified over a lifetime. It can build over a lifetime. If you start with mental chemistry, you're really just kind of in a hit and miss game with dating. And a lot of times you're going to lose. And if you don't lose immediately, it's going to be a long-term loss. Okay, Lover Girl, it's time for the final thought on today's show. If you truly want to be an adored woman, then it is always about your sexual time frame and not his. Hey Lover Girl, don't forget to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with all of your single smart girlfriends. And if you are tired of craptastic dates, craptastic men, and meh or fizzle out fast romantic experiences, then meet me over at secretsocietyofadoredwomen.com to schedule your application interview to work with me directly. Secret Society of Adored Women is a very special and close to my heart, way beyond the podcast, opportunity to completely reinvent your dating and love life as it is happening. It's your love life makeover year, where you can tell shitty dating experiences and shitty men to kiss your hot ass forever. Secret Society is you having your real life romantic fairy godmama at your fingertips instead of ever wasting another moment trying to figure it out on your own or on one-size-fits-all crap advice about men, dating, and love. These are the additional pieces that I won't reveal on the podcast or in public. We are going to cover all the ins and outs of Mantourage dating, leaving nothing untouched, and I am going to work with you directly to customize the experience to get everything you want out of life and love. But none of this means anything to your love life until you take the small step of courage by scheduling your application interview at secretsocietyofadoredwomen.com. Procrastination is the exclusive killer of all dreams, especially in your love life. It's time to get your dating and love life in order. It's definitely time to stop pretending you enjoy half-ass dating and love experiences, but most of all, it's absolutely the right time to develop your Mantourage and let me help you create everything you want romantically.